Okay. I uninstalled the source tree thing and I keep getting notifications. I have to really got itself wedged in my computer. Okay, so we're going to go over the Django beer ratings challenge. So this challenge, asks you to. Is there a question? So this challenge asks you to start off by implementing logging in and logging out. So we're going to need to do stuff with users and authentication, and then the rest of it is fairly open-ended, but it's going to be, beers and reviews or beers and ratings. I'm going to do ratings just because that's what I feel like doing. And I want to show you guys one feature of the models. So yeah, so our URLs will end up being, beer, slash whatever number that represents a beer in our database, the ID for a beer in our database, and then slash comments. So we can get all the comments for a beer. We can create a new beer. We can create a comment for a beer. All right, so I've forked this repo and cloned it down. Now I'm gonna start working. So first I'll create a virtual environment. Install Django. Yeah, let me add git ignore. Okay, so now here, what else do we need to? Yeah, that should be fine now. Okay, so we'll need to start by creating a project, right? So the largest, like the largest unit in Django is a project. And I'm just going to call it something very not very descriptive, but we definitely know it's a project. So then I'm going to cd into my project, and I'll create an app. And now that we know that you can use the Django admin command to create an app, I'm going to do that. That seems to make more sense. The question is, what app do we start with? And I'm going to start with the authentication stuff, although, there's no like, you could definitely do it otherwise, but I'll start with the user stuff. So I'll call it users. This is maybe not the best name, but that's what I'm going to call it. So now within the project, the Django project, we have an app, which is users. So just some boilerplate stuff we can take care of right off the bat is we'll go into the project's settings.urls, and we can add this app to the installed apps. I think everything else will be fine. We'll just stick with the SQLite database for now. And yeah, I'm gonna just because I'm lazy and I don't like typing in long passwords I'm developing, I'm just gonna comment this out, although that's probably a very bad practice. We shouldn't do that. Okay, so I think our settings is good now. So for users, so what we've done the last couple of days is use Django's built-in authentication app, but I want to do something a little bit different. And so rather than just kind of using everything out of the box, we'll have to do, it'll be slightly like one step lower level, just so you can see some of the things that are going on. You can't go too far down because otherwise, at a certain point you stop using Django and you're just doing stuff yourself. But we'll go one step lower. So we have the My Projects. We can start in URLs. In URLs, we'll add a path. So all of our like user login stuff will be handled on this route. So we'll go users, and we'll want to basically hand off. If anyone goes to users, we're going to hand it off to our users app, the URLs in our users app. So for that, we'll use include. Tell it the file that it should take a look at, which will be users.urls, which of course doesn't exist yet. So we'll go into the users project, and we don't have a URL, so we'll make that. And I'm just gonna copy some of this, because a lot of it's the same. And
you forgot your commas at the end.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the trailing comma is a good idea from like as you're developing, you're probably going to be adding stuff, so it's just a convenience, but you don't have to have a trailing comma there. And actually, there are some formats. So, in this case, trailing comma agnostic. It doesn't matter if you have it here or not. But for example, with JSON, you can't have trailing commas. So depending on the specific format you're looking at, that may or may not be an issue. Okay, so if someone goes to /users/sign up, so we'll have 3 routes. We'll have sign up, log in, and log out. Just the kind of basic 3. So sign up. We'll go to, again, we haven't written this view, but when someone goes to /users/signup, this function will get called. So views dot sign up, and we'll give it a name. We don't have to give it a name, but if we want to refer to it from within our application, it's a good practice. So, and since we're going to end up having more than one app, it's also a good idea to namespace. So there's a couple ways to do that. One is here. Do it here. You can also pass a namespace keyword argument to the include function here. We'll just do this. Okay, and then we'll have to import this views, which doesn't exist yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and just make our other routes, even though we don't have them yet. So we'll have sign up, we'll have login. Copy this. Log in and log out. I'm going to put my headphones on. The typing will be slightly less loud. Thank you. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
How's the clickety clack? Any better? Really going out of here.
Much better.
Okay.
Much better. Thanks.
Okay, so we've got all these views now. I'm going to go ahead and comment these other two out for the time being. So let's focus on writing this sign up view now. So we go into our views, and we know that we're going to have a function. We haven't talked about class-based views, but we'll get into that eventually. For now, we're doing function-based views. So sign up, and everything is always going to take a request object. And we can just pass for now, or maybe just, well, let's go ahead and we can test it out. HTTP response. Okay, so let's see if this works so far. We might have some problems. Okay, so we'll have to migrate everything to our database so we get all the default. Again, we haven't created our own models yet, but we need to be able to use Django's built-in stuff. So Python manage.py. Since we haven't done anything, we don't have to run make migrations. We can just run migrate. Okay.
So the make migrations for all of that stuff happens in the Django startup app.
The Django startup app.
Right, the Django start app function.
Yeah. So the Django start app, it won't have any. It won't have anything by default. I mean, it has the. It knows about them. It knows about these apps that are built in.
Right.
But your database doesn't exist and it's not configured. So you have to run migrate in order to actually, get these apps into your database.
Okay, cool, thanks.
So you can run Django without the stuff, in which case you would need to do that, but then you might as well not be using Django.
Thanks, sorry for the distraction.
No, it's fine. Okay, so we've got sign up here. So yeah, we can also create a super user. So I find that it's often convenient to use the admin GUI for basic stuff. So we'll create a super user. Okay, and I have a simple password because I've commented out all of the password checking. It lets me get away with having very insecure password. So in order to actually, well, this will be fine for now. So we can, when we actually create our own models, we'll have to add them to the admin, but for now, we don't need to worry about that. We'll run the server. Okay, so that doesn't work. We can check our admin. We can log in. Okay. So you can see that I get some stuff for free in the admin terminal without explicitly, telling Django to use it. Users and groups. I only have one user, which is the super user that I created. So super user is just a user, but with, this permission. So it's in a group that has certain permissions. All right, and let's go ahead and localhost/users. So I can see the routes that I have for users. So I have sign up. And I get my little HTTP response. So I know that everything is hooked up and everything's working. So what I want to do here is not just return hi, but return a login form. So we can do that. We'll get rid of that. And this login form is going to be, it's going to have to handle two kinds of requests. So the initial request, when someone first goes to this page, you're going to want to give them a form. So when someone makes a GET request, they should get a blank form. And when someone fills out that form and submits it, they're going to be making a POST request with that post. So this particular view needs to handle GET requests and POST requests. So we can do that at a very basic level by just using a conditional check. So if request, so this request object has a whole bunch of stuff on it. So we can request that method. So that's how we can tell if it's a GET request or POST request equals. So if it's a POST request, we'll do something.
Then she double equals.
Oh, thank you.
Can you say again why you want to do both here?
So we could design it differently. We could, someone submits a form and it gets submitted to some other endpoint. That would be definitely doable, but I think the kind of standard thing to do would be to have, when you submit a form, it makes a POST request to the same URL that it's on.
That would definitely not leak any additional information to the user. So by not exposing any more endpoints until they're already into the system. So I see that as reasonable.
Yeah, so typically the typical flow will be I make a GET request to a page that has a form in it. I fill out the form makes a POST request to that page, and then it will redirect me somewhere else. There's usually a closing redirect. Okay. All right, so we're going to need some kind of form here. So we can handle the GET request first. So we could just do everything, and we could write everything ourselves in HTML, and that would work fine. But I really don't like doing that, so we'll use Django's very convenient forms models. So I'm going to import. Where is that? Yeah, so what I'm gonna have to do is, so again, we could have everything here, but I'm gonna make another file called forms. And in my forms, I'm gonna have to import from Django dot, where is that? Lots of imports here. Okay, actually, I'm not going to make another, because what we're doing is so simple in terms of forms that I'm just gonna import them directly. All right, so I'm gonna need a user creation form. So I can look that up in the Django docs. Let's go to forms. can find this in the documentation. I don't know why it's giving me this older documentation.
Yeah, it sometimes does that. It's annoying.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of forms and you may have to search around, but here's what we'll end up using. So there's a user creation form which inherits from model form. So this will give us Django's default way of the form is just going to have a username and then 2 password fields. So we could make that ourselves, but it may be convenient to use Django's built-in version. So we'll do that. User creation form. Am I in a virtual environment? Yes. Okay. From django.contrib.auth.forms, import user creation form. And we can do form equals user creation form. And then we're going to want to serve up that form. So we're going to want to serve up that form, and we're going to inject the form into some HTML. So we can do that. So return render takes the request object. It will take a path to an HTML file that we want to serve up. So that will be users slash signup.html. And then our context object will pass it this form. So now we'll be able to access it there. Okay. So in order to actually to use this sign-up form, we're gonna have to create a templates folder in our app. So we'll do that. This is what Django expects by default. And we'll add that sign up. And we can create our HTML, and then we go ahead and paste in this. So we're going to want something that looks like this. So most forms that you write with Django, it's just going to have the skeleton of the form, and then the actual form is going to get passed in here. So here's where Django will actually do all of its default stuff. We just need to give it a container. But of course, we've created a full HTML document here. And if we have an application, there's probably going to be a lot of boilerplate. So we're just going to end up repeating this same thing over and over again. So what we should do at this point is probably create a default template for our app, a base template. So I'm going to do that. At this level. I'm going to create a base.html. And because I've done this, I'm going to need to go into my settings and let Django know what path to look for. So I'll go into the project settings, and I tell Django base directory / templates. So now Django will know how to find that base template that I've made. So I'm gonna create a default. This will be the beer rating site. And then in here, I can do, basically here's where we're gonna wanna insert all of the unique. So I could add a header, for example. So I'll add a header that everyone will take. And then here we'll create a block. And we'll have to close it as well. So we can insert whatever we want here. So this will be the particular form. So every page will have this stuff, and we'll end up adding like a login, logout link up here. But for now, this will be fine. All right, and then when we actually go to consume this as a base template, we'll go in here, and we'll first off get rid of all this stuff. We don't need it anymore. But we're gonna have to tell the templater that we're using a base template. So we'll do that as the first line. We'll do extends, and we called it base.html. And that'll be fine, but we also need to tell it to basically fill in the blank. So we created a blank with the block. So let's fill in that blank. Okay, so let's see if that works. Okay, so now we have our sign up form. You can see we have our header. This is where we got this from our base template, as well as the title here. And we have this form that Django gave us because we used where is that? We use this user creation form, which gives us all that stuff for free. Okay, so we can try, entering some stuff. And we get an error because we've made a post request to this route, and our post request doesn't return an HTTP object, which is what Django expects. So we'll have to change this too. So what happens is I go to the page, I make a GET request, I get a blank form, right? But when I fill it out, I make a post request, and I need I need that filled out form. So if we're using more of the higher level stuff that Django gives us, we could do this fairly straightforwardly, but we'll have to do a couple extra steps. So the first thing we want to do is we'll create a form, or create a form instance. Form equals user creation form, and we're gonna make sure that's populated with the request all the post data. So whatever the user filled out in the form, that's going to go, it's going to create an instance of this form that's filled out. And the standard kind of repetitive thing that you'll do is you check if the form is valid. So if form.is valid, if it's valid, then we can start doing some other stuff. So I'm not going to be doing error checking and handling additional HTTP redirects and all kinds of stuff just because it's too time consuming, but you should be handling errors and stuff. So once you call is valid on a form, you'll get some additional properties on the form. You'll get something called cleaned data. So, data on the form that's passed through the validation check. So you should be able to trust it, that at least that it's passed, Django's built-in validation and your own custom validation if you have any. So in order to create a user, we're going to need, we'll use Django's base user class, and that requires a username and a password. Unfortunately, we've just got that from our user creation form. So we'll have to pull that out. So username equals form dot clean data, and form dot clean data, and we'll get the username and the password. We'll get it from the form's clean data. And the form, so this is a little tricky. So it's not just password. There's actually password 1 and password 2, because when we create a user form, you need to create, you type in your password twice to make sure that it's the same. So we'll just get password 1. So then once we do that, we can create a new user. So someone's filled out a form. They've given us the username and password, but that doesn't really mean anything, right? We haven't done anything with it yet, really. So what we need to do is take that information and create a new user in Django. And I'm going to need to import user. I'll just do that up here. So from Django.crib auth.models, I believe, for user. And we'll do user.objects. Well, yeah, there's a couple ways to create a user. We'll do it this way first, so we can have an additional step. So username equals username. And so Ankur pointed out that you can't, anyway, we'll do it the wrong way, and then we'll take a look at what happens. Password. All right, so we have, we're creating a new user with the username and password, and then we'll save the user, right? Because we create an instance, then we have to save it. So new user save, and that should be good. So the pattern you're going to follow is when someone makes a post request, you need to redirect them somewhere. So we'll return. We don't really have anywhere to redirect them at the moment. We also need to import redirect. But for now, we'll just go to /. Or we can actually put them in, let's go back to the blank form. Users dot sign up. All right, so let's see if this works. So okay, so it looks like I didn't get any errors. And I can look at my logs here, and it looks like everything is good. Okay. Sorry, is there a question? So it looks like everything is good, right? I didn't get any errors. I'm not seeing anything in my logs. So let's check the admin terminal. Go into users, and that user did get created, right? So everything's looking good. So we created a user. So it looks like Ankur was wrong. So we can create a user and give it a username and password and just do it like that, right?
Is
But
the
there's-
password going to be like some long encrypted string or?
Yeah, well, so there's a problem. So let's look at the. So even though we're not getting any errors and everything looks good, if we actually try to log in with this user or do anything, it's not going to work. So Django uses a hashing algorithm to, for security reasons. So you can't just directly put in a password that way. You have to use another method for doing that. So this user is basically unusable right now. So instead of doing it like this, and by the way, this is an error that can cost you lots and lots of time and headache because it's one of those situations where you're not really getting an error message, right? So, although error messages can be, very disappointing and stressful when you're developing, the worst thing is when everything appears to be working fine and it's actually not. So what we need to do is let's see if we can find it in the docs. Yeah, let's try that. Be in here. So here's the fields and user. You can see Django doesn't store the raw password. Raw passwords can be, so there's obviously going to be some issue. And here we have a method on the user class, which we're using. And we have set password. So sets the user's password to the given raw string, taking care of the password hashing. Doesn't save the user object. So it's not entirely obvious or clear, but this is what we're going to have to use. So we'll have to use set password. So new user and new user.set password, and then we have to save it still. So let's see if this makes any difference. So one thing you can do, by the way, let me delete these and I'll refresh this. So if you go into the developer tools, you can see that when I refresh, I get a Csrf token. So this is something that Django is doing by default. It's just to basically control who's making what request. So this is basically a unique value that will be associated with this particular session. So that when I make post requests, Django can check if it matches. All right, so username, let's try. I'm going to delete this guy from the database.
Question, Chad.
Yeah.
So right now we didn't do anything with our models, right? We're able to create users with fields based on Django's user creation form.
Yeah, so the form is based on this. So we're importing this user class from Django. So this is, it's as if we went into models and created a user, and we could actually create our own subclass of user as well.
So if we only, for our database, if we're only going to store users, we could by using this, we would never even have to create models technically.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But this is a model. So yeah, you wouldn't have to specifically create your own, but it's usually a good idea to subclass this probably in case you want to add stuff later. It just allows you to do that. It gives you, even if initially it's exactly the same, it gives you some flexibility later on.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But we're just going to use this directly for now. So all right, so we only have our super user, so let's go back and we'll try creating this Q guy and forbidden. So we're getting an error, so let me clear out the Csrf tokens. So if using an old token, then Django is gonna think you're coming from somewhere else. You're trying to make a post request from somewhere else. All right, so we got that token, so hopefully that will work now. Okay, so we get the same thing. It looks like everything worked fine, but I'm suspicious because the last time it also looked like everything worked fine. Let's go in and we'll refresh this here. And we can see that we have this user queue, which we had last time, but now we have the correct password. So our password is good now. So we should be able to actually, use this user, log in, log out, and everything else. So we have our form. We fill it out. The client fills it out, and then we check if the form is valid. That validation check creates some additional properties on the form that we can access under cleaned data. We can grab the values that we want, in this case, username and password, or password1. And then we can create a new user using Django's built-in user model. But there's a little trick here where we have to set the password in a separate step. Once we do that, we can save our new user, and then just following best practice, we redirect after a post request. So now we have the ability to add new users to our site. So that's good. The users also need to be able to log in and log out. So we can add that now. Let's go to our URLs and we'll add a login. We'll add our login. It's going to throw an error because we don't have, that doesn't exist yet. And login is going to follow a similar structure where it's going to give the user a blank form when they make that initial GET request. Then when they fill it out, they'll make a post request to the same route. We'll grab the contents of the post request, do some stuff, and then redirect them. Okay. So we'll follow the same setup. So if request dot method equals post, and again, we should be doing additional error checking here, but for the sake of time, we're not going to do that. Okay, yeah, I forgot the double equals again. Okay, so to make a GET request, we're going to do something very similar. We're just going to create an instance of a form. Then we're going to serve it up in a template. Question is, what kind of form? Again, we could just do this in raw HTML. That would be fine. But this is a common function, and I don't like making forms. So there is a form that we can use called the Authentication Form. Let's see if we can find this. So you have to dig around in the documentation and do searches and stuff to find this stuff. But here's the authentication form. It's a form for logging a user in, which sounds exactly like what we want. You can read through, but the default behavior, I think, will be fine for us. So we'll use the authentication form. And we're going to do the same thing we did above. So we'll return render request, and that will be users/login.html, which we will make shortly. And then we'll also just pass in that same form. Okay, so we're gonna have to go here and add a new template. I'm just gonna copy this, whoops. Because it'll be very similar. This will be all right, so that should be basically all we need to do there for the GET request. So let's check that out. We'll go instead of sign up, we'll go to login. Okay, so that works. It's our login. We still have our header and everything else. But right now we're not going to be able to do anything, right? We're just making a GET request. We haven't handled the POST request. So we'll take care of the POST request, which of course will be more complicated. But the basic flow will be the same. So the more you do stuff in Django, the more you'll see that you just end up doing the same kinds of things over and over and over again, which is why Django has all these convenient class-based views that we'll look at later. So form, this time it will be the authentication form. And this authentication form needs to be filled in, right? So let's follow the pattern. We'll do requests.post. Right, and then we'll keep moving on. So I'll save some trouble by saying that for whatever reason, Django kind of, so this won't work. And you would expect it to, because this is just the basic pattern that Django uses, but sometimes let me I'm not sure what is up with my development environment. I don't know if I did something weird. All right, I'm not sure what's up, so let me just look it up. Django source. Actually, I think it's this one. Auth.models, auth.forms. So you can see the authentication form here. It's the base class for authenticating users. So that's good. So it accepts a username and a password. If you look here under the init, though, it says that. So this is something that I encountered because I was having, I spent an hour having this problem. So the form data comes in via the standard data core. So what that ends up meaning is that you can't just pass in request equals post. You have to do it as a keyword argument, data equals. So small thing, which is very annoying. Sometimes working with things that are mostly pre-built for you is convenient, and sometimes it's annoying. So just something to watch out for. So now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to follow the same pattern that we see over and over and over again. So we're going to check if it's valid. So if form that is valid, and we will do, we'll want to get the username and the password from this form. So we'll do the same thing we did before. Username is form.cleaned data. We get the clean data attribute once we call is valid. And in this case, there's only one password field, so we'll just get password, not password 1 or password 2. Okay. So once we have the users, so here all we did was we grabbed the username and password, and then we created a new user. In this case, we're gonna have to go through another extra step. So let me take a look here in the docs. Okay. So here's another thing that you might end up looking up and figuring out. So if you want to authenticate a user, so authentication, the number of steps you have to go through might not be entirely clear at the outset. So if we want to log someone in, we first have them fill out the form. We check that the form is valid. Then we have to authenticate them. But that doesn't mean, that's not the same thing as logging them in. So it's basically just checking, does this user exist? And, you know, that's basically it. Is this a real user? And this authenticate function will do that check and it'll return you the user. It's almost like making a, you know, user.objects.get request. So you'll get back a user object. So authenticate. So take some keywords, arguments. So it's going to authenticate, which I need to import. And that comes from, where does that come from? Contrib.auth. Okay, so now we have this authenticate function that we can use. So we'll check, and if the user is valid, this will be the user, and if it's not, it'll be none. So this value will be none for an invalid user, or the user if it's valid. So what we do is we just check if the user exists. And if the user exists, then we log in the user. So there's another built-in function. Probably have to import as well. Let's check that in the documentation. So login takes in a request and a user, which we'll get the user once we run authenticate. So authenticate will return a user. So here's an example. So you run authenticate, that should return a user, and then you run login. Okay, so we have a request and a user. So now we should be done. Yeah, we should be done here. So we'll redirect the user. And we'll just, for now, we'll just do this. This is not very sensible, but okay.
Doesn't log in
Oh.
return user as well.
So I've done something, again, this is one of those errors that you could spend a whole lot of time figuring out. Does anyone know what's wrong?
You're redefining login.
Yeah. So I've imported a built-in function from Django, and I've given it the same, my function here has the same name. So login, I'll just change that. Then I'll have to go into URLs. Okay. So at this point, we should be returning redirect. So let's see if that works. So I'll go into the admin terminal just to double check my valid user, okay, Q and U. And go to my site. So I'm at the login page. Let me go ahead and I'll sign out. Previous user. Refresh and I get a new CSRF token. So try logging in, and I got redirected to the sign up page, which doesn't make any sense, but it's just a placeholder for now. And I can see here that I have a session token, which indicates that, you know, we have a logged in user now. So it looks like that is working. It's been like an hour, so I guess we should probably take a break. These framework days are long days. So we'll take a short break and we'll come back and keep going.